Hello everyone, here to talk about stage 2 of the CrossFit Open. The workouts have now come out, I'm sure you've all seen them. Let's cut to the chase and let's talk about how we're going to attack these workouts. The very first thing to think about here is that we have submission windows where we have to be submitting X number or certain workouts within a certain time frame. Now that does not mean that we can't complete more workouts within a time frame, it just means the submission must be put in before a certain date. So when we look at the actual workouts that have come out here, we definitely want to think about strategizing the way that we attack these workouts, essentially starting with the workouts that have the least amount of fatigue and pushing back as far as possible the workouts that might be a little bit more damaging in terms of residual fatigue the next day or delayed onset muscle soreness, all those kind of things. So the first thing that jumps out to me here is a front squat. It's an expression of absolute strength, and when we look at what we have for test 1 and test 2, specifically the workout with a lot of GHC sit-ups and pistols, doing that before front squats is probably not going to set us up for success on the front squat. So the first thing I want to recommend is that we actually begin day 1 today with the front squat test. That's the first thing we're going to do. And then from there, it's about really selecting the workout that's going to, again, have the least amount of fatigue, because if we do workouts with lots of fatigue, that's just going to take away from our ability to express ourselves in other workouts later. So when we're looking at the next 2 tests, we're looking at the handstand push-up test, which is test 1, and we're looking at test 2, which is the GHC sit-up pistol test. I would really recommend there probably going from the front squat test into the handstand push-up test, relatively quick-ish workout for most people, and not going to have a whole amount of residual fatigue. And then we're going to finish day 1 with the test 2, which is going to be the GHC sit-up and pistol workout. Now really, for most folks here, I'm talking to you, those who are kind of in the Asian region or the Oceanic Pacific region. Those in the US, we kind of have it a little bit different because we could have potentially done some workouts on Thursday evening as well. So just based on the timing that we had to work with here, I apologize, we couldn't get anything out to you guys early enough. Okay, so let's now run through kind of just some strategy or strategizing on each of the 3 workouts. In this video, we're just going to talk about test 1, 2, and the front squat test, which I believe is test 4. And then I will get another video out later on where we will talk about kind of day 2 and day 3. Just want to get this workout to you guys ASAP. Okay, so let's begin with the front squat test. Now remember, we have a 20-minute window here to complete our 4-rep front squat test. That's a really, really long time. I should precursor this with really important you take the time to move through and read and understand the movement standards for each of these workouts. I'll try and cover some of the movements that I've seen, or the movement standards that I've seen that we need to be aware of, but it's really important that both you and your judge have read through that and really thoroughly understand what is required of you. Similarly, the floor plan and the workout flow that Adrian Bosman sent out the other day, go through those videos as well. It just doesn't make sense for us to be preparing for a workout, doing a workout, and then realizing that we haven't met the standards of the floor layout or the movement standards, and therefore we have to do it again. That is just really valuable time and energy wasted. So due diligence, do your research, know exactly what you need to be doing in each of these tests. Starting with the front squat test, we have 20 minutes. That's a really, really long time, but it's also probably the right amount of time that most of us would use to kind of build to something really heavy. Now, what I would suggest is that you set up your station, set up your cameras, get all that stuff ready to go firstly, and I would begin warming up. Now, your warm up is your typical front squat warm up, whatever that normally is. I would think about positions and also kind of getting your midline and trunk and front rack ready to rock and roll. Actually going through some load, kind of warming up to a moderate, even moderate heavy load. And then I would start your camera and the 20-minute clock and actually hit a fairly tough set. Then really use as much of that 20 minutes to recover, and that would probably give you enough time for kind of 3 to 4 working sets. I would really advise here kind of hitting the number you kind of have in your head as to what you want to hit, probably still with 5-6 minutes on the clock to go, giving you enough time to kind of hit that or attack that 50-50. That's it on the front squat test. Let's talk a little bit more about test 1, which is the handstand push-up test. Okay, so of course, the strategy here is going to vary greatly depending upon your capacity, probably specifically within strict and kipping handstand push-ups or kind of shoulder endurance. For a lot of people, it's 30 strict handstand push-ups in that first test. For someone like myself, that's quite a lot, but for the elite in the world, that's not very many at all. Which means that if you are elite, especially at these movements, I would really be thinking about attacking that first piece. We have a 1 minute rest between the 2 pieces, which is definitely not full adequate rest. But again, like if you are someone who is in that elite and you have the ability to express a lot of repetitions in handstand push-up, then you really got to attack this kind of workout and treat it as a sprint workout. Essentially, the movements are getting easier, or the handstand push-up anyway is, as you go through this workout, because it becomes a kipping handstand push-ups where we can use the hips. If you are not elite, I would think about a smart braking strategy on those handstand push-ups, on both the strict and potentially even the kipping handstand push-ups. I'd probably rather folks break on the strict handstand push-ups than the dumbbell movement, just because the time taken to kind of put dumbbells down and pick them back up again is potentially a lot of time wasted. In terms of kind of the setup of the floor, there's nothing really to talk about here. You have to adhere to the standards. If you are sprinting this, then you need to be hustling between those movements. If you are taking more of a strategic, broken approach to this workout, then I would still recommend kind of hustling between those movements. I would recommend in terms of the dumbbell movement for the hang power clean, remember, read the standards again. It's a hang, so you must stand up tall first. The hang can be from anywhere, but I'd really recommend kind of moving through kind of like a swinging bicep curl versus actually dipping under the dumbbells. That's just another time component, as well as kind of extra knee flexion. It's going to take away some energy and time. So we're kind of muscle cleaning all those dumbbell cleans. And in the shoulders overhead, for most of you who are strong enough, I really recommend kind of push pressing your way through those repetitions. If you do have fantastic mobility and a push jerk is actually a resting position, which saves your shoulders for the kipping handstand push-ups, maybe that's an option to you. Just bear in mind potential slipping on the standard of the handstand push-ups. Now they have created a new standard, which is the lines. The box is now bigger. I think this is a good call because now they're saying that no part of the hand may touch the line. So make sure you're comfortable with that and you're warming that up in your warm-up. What I would suggest is, if you're not sure as to where your hands go, get some chalk, place those hands on the mats or whatever you're using, so that when you're in a fatigue-based state, you can just move and you know exactly where your hands are going. If you're someone like me who turns your hands out on a handstand push-up, just bear in mind that's going to take away space in the box. So if you're someone who can have your hands straight in a handstand push-up, that's actually going to give you a slightly wider stance. So again, this is just something for you guys to play around with. Hopefully you've actually played around with this handstand push-up standard already in our kind of Wednesday session. Okay, the other thing here would be potential slipping on the mats. This happens a lot. We've seen it a lot where we get sweaty and the hands start to slide out. Something I have seen before is actually wearing gymnastics grips, because the grips actually stop you slipping on the mat. Otherwise, have a towel and have some chalk and make sure you keep that station dry. You can even ask your judge to help you out there. That's pretty much everything I have for test 1. Let's move on to test 2, which is now 60 GHD steps and the rope climbs and pistol squats. Okay, so in context, this is a lot of repetitions. There's probably not many people other than the elite in the world who've done this amount of volume on these particular movements, specifically the GHD sit-up and the pistol. So bear that in mind. Our bodies may not be adequately prepped to be pushing really, really hard through this workout. So for the majority of us, kind of not speaking to the elite here, a smart braking strategy specifically on the GHD sit-ups and pistols is going to be wise. Think about those two movements as well. The GHD sit-ups can be very taxing to the trunk and the hip flexors and also the quads. Then we move into the pistol squat, very similar movements. The hip flexors are required to keep the leg up and off the floor, and there's a lot of trunk flexion as we're kind of bending over into our squat. So what you definitely will feel is fatigue from the GHD sit-ups, cross over into pistols, and then getting back onto GHD sit-ups, you're gonna feel that. So what I will say for pretty much everyone here is break those GHDs right from the start. There's no point with a 20-minute workout kind of going all the way to failure and fatigue here, or just gassing yourself out so that you then can't execute pistol squats, and then you can't hit subsequent sets of GHD sit-ups. So things like descending rep schemes are always good when you have a big chunk of repetitions to get through. 60 repetitions rather than going 20, 20, 20. You may think about kind of like a 25, 20, 15. That might add up to 60, I'm not sure, mass is not a strong point. And the same with the pistols, potentially actually just breaking those things up right from the start. Pistols, speed is going to be very case dependent, individualized. Some people might be able to move really fast through pistols. Some people, like myself, may have to just kind of slog your way through them. Just one of those movements you've got to chip away at. Now the rope climbs, there's going to be no grip fatigue from any of the other movements, so potentially going to be relatively fresh. But do bear in mind, if you are using a foot clamp, which I assume pretty much everyone will be, I don't think going legless on this workout would be a smart idea, unless you're kind of like in the final moments of the workout, you're just trying to get a repetition out and you've got enough energy for it. But if we're using the foot clamp and the J hook, we will be bringing the knees up and clamping it in. Now bear in mind the knees up is more hip flexion and trunk fatigue. So just bear that in mind. But what I would say is kind of the rope climbs is where we want to kind of attack this workout. Chip away to the GHDs, chip away to the pistols, and attack those rope climbs to try and save a bit of speed. No standards with regards to how you come down from the rope. So if you're someone who's kind of practiced and executed a fast descent, that could be really helpful, not only in terms of saving energy, but also kind of just moving a little bit quicker and saving time through this workout. Just a couple of reminders, rope climbs, wear long socks unless you want some nasty burns in your shins. Wear tights or leggings so you can slide down that rope. With regards to the pistols, this is case dependent. If you move through pistols way better, way more efficiently with lifters on, it might actually be a good idea. Lifters aren't really going to take away from your ability to do GHD sit-ups. They may take away from your ability to do rope climbs, but it isn't too big a deal. With that said, if you are going to wear lifters for this workout, you haven't been practicing rope climbs with lifters, make sure you really focus on the foot clamp in your warm-up. And if it's just not possible for you to execute well with lifters, then that's your call to make. Using things like the heel inserts might also be a really good idea if you don't want to wear lifters. With regards to GHD sit-ups, just in terms of when you do break, think about your resting positions. We're trying to rest or save the trunk and the hip flexors as much as possible here. So I would advise when you come to the top of the GHD to not sit in this kind of rest in this broken position because your trunk is still going to be engaged. Try two options, I would say. Number one, take the feet out the clamps altogether and slide yourself forward so you're actually sitting upright on the GHD and resting there, or even kind of just leaning on the foot clamp. Or alternatively, you can actually get out the GHD altogether and just rest that way. But I wouldn't recommend staying in a flex position. Just in terms of movement standard, probably the last one here on the GHD sit up, the rep starts with the hands touching the pads where your foot comes. So if you're doing something like a fast mount onto the GHD where you're kind of leapfrogging onto it and you drop straight down to your first rep, that won't count. You must touch the pads first and then move down into your GHD sit up. Now, second thing here, which is interesting, I'm gonna have to practice this. I'm used to kind of bringing my hands out wide on a GHD sit up and touching the floor. Here they've said that the hands must be directly over the head, I believe it is, and behind the head. So if you're looking at from the side angle, if you draw a line where the head is, the hands must be behind that. So I actually think the movement standard that I would typically use for GHD sit up would actually not be viable based on this standard. So that's just something else for you guys to think about and practice. Last one, fueling. If you're someone who's now going to essentially hit 3 workouts in one day, make sure you're prepping all your nutrition, change your clothes, all that kind of stuff for the day. In between these workouts, you're probably not going to have a whole amount of time. So I would really prioritize things like fast absorbing carbohydrates, liquid protein, and kind of at the end of your day, remember this is just day 1, that's where you're going to kind of backload most of your calories. So make sure you're just prepped and you're not having to kind of worry and stress about that kind of stuff when the day has already begun. Go through diligent warm-ups, go through diligent cool-downs. Those things are going to really count when you're doing multiple events over a few day period. Don't shortchange that kind of stuff. Be diligent and set yourself up for success the following day. Okay, there will be another video, remember, talking about the remaining tests, which is going to be 3 and 5 now, which is going to be the snatch and burpee box jump over, as well as a wall ball and row test. Good luck to everyone. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself. You can drop your notes in on the comments below or reach out to your coach. Good luck, have fun.